Home Affairs will oppose Dr. Nandipha Magudumana's High Court bid to challenge her arrest whilst on the run in Tanzania. Magudumana and her partner, convicted rapist and murderer Thabo Bester, were arrested in the East African nation last month. Dr. Magudumana wants the High Court in Bloemfontein to issue her immediate release from custody. Magudumana and others stand accused of assisting Bester escape from prison last year. At the same time, the department has issued Bester with an ID after being unidentified for years. Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi also says his department has revoked the South African passport issued to Magudumana. So to discuss this further, we're going to be joined via Zoom by practicing attorney Kabelo Seabi. Kabelo, good afternoon. Thanks for your time with us here on the SABC.
Good afternoon to you and good afternoon to your viewers.
All right. So following the briefing earlier on by Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, the matter regarding Dr. Magudumana and Thabo Bester is one that's developing day by day since their capture. As we heard, Dr. Magudumana has now filed an urgent application for the Free State High Court to declare her arrest in Tanzania and deportation to South Africa unlawful. Perhaps you can help us understand on, the grounds of this application from your understanding.
The particular application is based on the basis that Dr. Magudumana was deported from Tanzania. Now, in terms of the Tanzanian Immigration Act, Section 12 in particular, it deals with what must happen to a person that has been declared to be a prohibited immigrant in Tanzania. Now, that act provides that once an immigration officer has arrested somebody, that person should be brought before a magistrate, and the declaration of being a prohibited immigrant is made by the director or the minister in that country. Now, the court would have to check whether the processes that led to Dr. Magudumana being brought back to South Africa, whether those were in compliance with that Immigration Act.
Kabelo, speaking of compliance, perhaps you could also help us understand what extradition is and deportation, perhaps the difference between the two, and how could the route that has been chosen by government today to bring the two back have any impact on the case?
There are two processes. With an extradition, where a person is a fugitive from justice and is required by one country that wants to try that fugitive from justice, it would send a formal request that that person be surrendered by the other country to the country that requires the presence of that fugitive to be tried. Now, that would have required compliance with the laws on extradition, which then would have led to the surrender by the one country to the receiving country of the fugitive from justice. In this case, that was not the process that was followed. What happened was that Dr. Magudumana and Thabo Bester were in Tanzania without having the proper documentation to be in Tanzania. And because of that, they were found to have been what one would term prohibited immigrants and were to be removed from Tanzania, not be surrendered to another country, but all that was needed was that they be removed from Tanzania. Now, what actually happened is that they were not simply removed from Tanzania, they were handed over to authorities of another country, being South Africa.
Kabelo, I'm listening to what you're saying, and I want to understand if I heard you correctly. So if the deportation wasn't handled correctly, could all the new charges against Dr. Nandipha Magudumana fall away? I'm asking this perhaps because should the court find Dr. Magudumana's arrest unlawful and, there are loopholes within the deportation process, what could this potentially mean for her from your vantage point?
The court that is going to deal with that matter has to determine as to whether Dr. Magudumana's transportation from Tanzania to South Africa, whether that was in compliance with the law. If her transportation from or her removal from Tanzania to South Africa was not in compliance with the law and was unlawful, it means that Dr. Magudumana cannot be tried in a South African court because her presence in the South African court will be tainted by the unlawfulness.
So how would this impact the case, the larger case at hand? What would this mean for Dr. Nandipha Magudumana?
If it is found that her removal from Tanzania to South Africa was unlawful, it would imply that the charges that are now pending before the Bloemfontein magistrate court would have to be withdrawn. She would have to be released, and the state would have to find a lawful method of bringing her in front of the court again.
Kabelo, thank you for that insight.